Hello, everyone. Welcome. It's like we're in the year 3000 in this studio for season 2, I believe, Public Media Network has dubbed, of Inside the Alley, Farmers Alley Theater's very own podcast. So happy to welcome you for the beginning of the season here, the beginning of our 12th season, the 2019-20 season at Farmers Alley Theater. We are almost at our bar mitzvah, but we have a really great lineup for you, starting what's going to be opening on Friday, October 4th, 2019, a reimagining of the classic Lerner and Loewe musical Camelot. My name is Adam Weiner. I am your host for the next brief moments we have together. I'm also executive director at Farmers Alley Theater, so I have my hands on a lot of different areas, but I'm so pleased to be here to be talking to the three stars of our production of Camelot, our King Arthur, our Queen Guinevere, and our Sir Lancelot. Welcome. How you doing?
Great.
I'll introduce you guys. Doing well.
Thank you for having us.
That's right. We're so glad to be here in this really sweet studio. And
I was just saying how cool Public Media Network is.
I know.
This whole place this complex is beautiful.
It's a great space to communicate and to get the word out, and definitely publicmedianetwork.com, is that the website? Publicmedianet.org.
Of course it's org. That makes it even better.
So let me introduce who I have here today. We'll go from left to right. First, from Philadelphia, or the Philly area, you should say, we are pleased to welcome Kevin Toniazzo-Naughton. Is that
Close,
correct?
Toniazzo, but I'll still give you points for trying.
I apologize for that. You are here from the Philadelphia area.
Yes.
You are a graduate of Penn State, is that correct?
Yes.
You are a Nittany Lion, and you have an extensive resume here. We're so glad to have you here with us for the opening history. Do you have any history with the show, with Camelot?
Actually, yes. This is my third production of Camelot.
How's it going so far? Where does it rank in the three? It's okay.
Every production is unique and special,
Yes.
and this one has all of its unique and special qualities.
Cool. But not all is Lancelot, right?
No, 2 is Lancelot, and
Okay.
one kind of Lancelot once removed. I understudied Lancelot in my very
see.
first production. Okay. I played Sir Sagramore.
I see. Okay. And how did you end up getting in with Farmers Alley? And you answered the call, and
Yeah, so I was actually, the story is kind of funny. So I was working at a theater in the Berkshires this summer, and I actually was given a recommendation to submit for this show. And at the time, I was going from job to job, and I was like, I want to get back to New York. I was like, I need to be back in the city. I was like, I just don't know if this is. I just was at a point where I just was feeling, might be just too much. This might be too much. Just like I need a second to breathe. Just need a second to be Kevin for a moment.
Mm-hmm.
And the minute I said no, the next week went by, and I went, oh my gosh, I love this show. Why am I? What did I? Okay, life goes on.
This is the first time with this special version?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I see.
And time passes, as time does, and then I get a lovely Facebook message from the lovely Sarah Ellis, and she mentions that she is going to be in a production of Camelot at One Farmers Alley Theater.
I see. So it was a conspiracy.
And then, I looked at this,
Guinevere is
and they
very
said
good.
they were looking for a Sir Lancelot, and I thought, oh my goodness, they're going to hate me because they're going to think, oh, now he's crawling back. But I accepted, and I sent in my information.
Way less. You know, that's what happened.
And then I accepted the audition. I submitted, and well, time as it does passes again, and now I'm here, sitting here at this table, and excited and very fortunate to be playing Lancelot.
You're here
again.
wonderful. Well, we're so glad to have you. And people do like, and I hope you're finding the same thing too, being here in Kalamazoo, as kind of like a respite in a ways. I mean, you're here for 6 weeks. And it's a smaller community, obviously smaller town, and you can breathe a little bit. I mean, I was in New York this past weekend just for 4 days, and I was like ready to go. I said, this is too many people. I can't do it. I met my cousin there, my family there, and she's got 2 little kids. I'm like, I do not know how you do it. And she's like, sometimes I don't know either. she drove her car to come meet us for lunch, and she was like, I was trying to park, and it's $57 per hour for a parking spot.
Yep, that's typical.
Hey,
New York for you.
All
Anyway,
right.
but the other two, you are also New York residents, correct?
Yes.
So Sarah Ellis is here to us from New York, but she's from Wisconsin.
I am.
And you've never done Camelot before, correct? But,
Never done it. But it's funny, every time I've told anyone I'm doing this show, they're like, you played the role, right? Like, they're like, you've done this before. And I'm like, no, I actually
not too many
haven't.
people do this show.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah, and we'll get
Yeah.
into why, I think, in just a little bit. But you were on the national tour of A Gentleman's Guide for Love and Murder. A wonderful, fun show.
Yes, very fun show. Which is, there's definitely some similarities in the style of Camelot and Gentleman's Guide.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, there are definitely some, just even with like the accent, also just the royalty and the hierarchy of things. The early 19th century of England still has some leftovers of what Camelot had set the stage for, I think, as far as hierarchy and behavior and the way that ladies conduct themselves and maybe shouldn't conduct themselves, and all sorts of fun things to play around with.
I see. Well, we're so glad to have you here, and Kalamazoo audiences are lucky to have all 3 of these actors here. We definitely make it a point to bring in folks from all over the country, because you wouldn't be able to, unless these guys came in on a national tour of whether it's Gentleman's Guide to Murder, or Dave you were in the national tour of Chicago, is that right? And on the Broadway company of Chicago as well. You would only have gotten to see him if you went to like Miller Auditorium, these big touring houses. That's it, where you're sitting way far back and you don't, you can't hear sometimes, you can't see, but you can come to Farmers Alley and see these fabulous performers up close and personal. That's for sure.
You're right about the respite kind of thing
Yeah.
in Kalamazoo. We love it here. We're having such a good time.
So much fun.
Like ingratiating ourselves in the community and getting a really good cocktail. Who would have thought Kalamazoo has a great mixology?
Oh yes,
Fantastic
well
cocktails.
You have been to Bell's yet and all
Yes,
that.
we've
That
been to
was
Bell's.
actually a driving force, because Kalamazoo is always.
that what sealed the deal.
I can be nothing but honest, and I've always wanted to go to Kalamazoo and want to do one of my favorite shows, and in a company that I've never worked for before, which is always fun and exciting for me. And number 3, I've always wanted to go to Bell's, and that was one of the first things.
He's
I
not
got to
lying.
do.
He
Oh,
is
there
a
you go.
huge beer guy.
Nice.
Yes.
Well, awesome. Gotta go apple picking or go to the farm.
We've done it.
Oh,
Gall
there
Meadows.
you go. Oh yeah.
All Meadows.
Awesome. And Dave, I wonder, what is your? You mentioned that you did when you did Chicago. Was it in the tours, I guess? But talk about a little bit about your experience with doing shows in a smaller space like Farmers Alley with only 100 seats, and how that translates.
I have to say, it's been a minute. I did a lot of black box work in university, conservatory, and then basically right out of college, I joined the national tour, then went to the Broadway company. I was in and out of that. And what I like about Chicago, it does play in a bigger house, but it has an intimate feel about it. So I do feel like I'm coming back to my roots in this show in terms of that style of performance.
Let's see. Here's some inside information. We had Chicago on our list a couple
Really?
years ago to do, and we got the rights rejected
Really?
because of the tour. I
Of the
don't
tour.
know. Because
Doesn't surprise me.
people are so threatened by our little theater doing Chicago. I don't know what. But we have this intimate space. Camelot isn't known for being done in intimate spaces like ours. And there are only 9 people in this cast. So how do we do this? How could you do this big grand show of Camelot? Well, there's a new version out there that premiered in... Dave,
I want to say 2010, 2011.
Okay, yeah.
Two River Theater.
Oh, there you go.
Actually, started in California, then went there.
And they scaled back this production of Camelot, which is usually has extra characters like Merlin and Morgan Le Fay,
Morgan Le
Palinor.
Fay.
If you know the show at all, and it deviates a lot from what the main story is, which is these three characters right here: Arthur, Lancelot, and Guinevere. So can Dave is kind of like I come to know him over the past few weeks is like a theatrical encyclopedia. So I'm gonna what would you say, just to talk really briefly about this version of Camelot? What's changed? What's different than the Richard Harris, the Richard Burton, Robert Goulet things that we've seen in the past?
Well, I would love the other two to jump in, please.
Okay,
if I
yes,
forget
please.
something. But and Kevin has done the show previously, but I would say a big difference is mostly visual, I would say. Mm-hmm. So it's not opening up to this big proscenium. I mean, the opening scene, the classic, the original, was, they're in the forest, and then it's, you're seeing huge trees, you're seeing a hill, like he falls out of a tree. In this production, we're in a black box space, and what I love, it's very a la Peter and the Starcatcher, where, trees can be made out of any different kind of
representational.
It's a very representational production. And rather than focusing on huge sets of armor, just one little piece could bring the symbolism of what we are trying to create.
Yeah. There are numbers cut and characters cut, right?
Yes.
Then I think one of the knocks on the show back when it premiered in like 1960, 61, it was a very bloated show. And it was filled with a lot of problems, I think, too, reading about it and producing it.
Actually, a reviewer said it was comparable to Tristan and Isolde in terms of needing to go to the restroom because it was that long.
Oh. My goodness. I think I read somewhere like there was a tryout in Toronto where the show was 4.5 hours long.
Oh.
That's what they were talking about.
Yeah. Oh, okay. There you go.
Sheesh, that's
My
insane.
goodness.
Yeah.
But this is going to be a tight, 2:15 maybe to 2:30, I think.
Well, if we get our tempos in order, yeah.
But yeah, because it's really scaled, and it's framed in such a way where you're like a troupe of players.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And I think it works perfectly. Like that Peter and the Starcatcher, or 39 Steps in a way, in some way, that we're going to tell you this story now. And you step in and out of character at times.
Yes.
Which is not in the show. Tell me, and I noticed that, Kevin, with you too, when so you're Lancelot, so you're speaking with an accent.
Yes.
But when you break out and you're doing narration, like talking about his inner monologue a bit.
Yeah.
But in the third person, what is that like when you have to do that? Do all of you do that?
Oh.
Yeah.
I know you do. Yeah.
Yes. It's actually it's a wonderful reconnection with the audience as well, because as we have talked about this, like this intimate space, so you're automatically invited into this show, into this space. You're in our faces, and we're right in yours. Right. And that little check-in, because we are all revelers when we come in. We are ourselves about to put on this piece, and we do this kind of this tribal dance to get into it too. We kind of join together, and and we become them, and pieces just flow, and then pieces appear, and King Arthur is created in the first moments, and it's just a really cool moment to center the audience in. And then when you actually get that disconnect again, and you get to become that reveler in your full knight garb, but you get to just cue them in on why Lancelot is the way he is.
Right.
It just gets that first touch of the humanity in him, because in his first moments you can be a little taken aback and it's like, who is this guy?
Yeah, it could be. It's a tightrope you have to walk.
Yes.
I think in terms of caricature and real humanity. Yeah.
And I find that to be a very unique gift for this production in particular, to be able to say, here's a little reason why I am. So,
well, deft acting, and we're so pleased to have director Lee Buckles come in from Louisville, and he runs the Derby Dinner Theater down there, and he's been with us the last few weeks, and with choreographer Heather Folsom to do a lot of the movement, which there is a lot. And I really think if you come and see Camelot, you're going to see the show with new eyes, with fresh eyes, like you're seeing it for the first time. Last time I saw Camelot, goodness, was a long time ago. But I remember bits. I remembered a dog but there's no dog in this show.
Oh yeah, it was Pellinor's dog.
Oh
That's
yes,
right.
yes. So talk to me for a little bit about being in this small space, because the changes that are being made to the show, like Camelot, is not unique for a classic show to kind of be reimagined in this way, right? It's kind of almost all the rage lately, or the past 10, 15 years. I mean, I kind of just have a list of shows that have been scaled back, including Camelot. I mean, we have one on Broadway right now with Oklahoma and the reimagining that's been done there. We can talk about that in a little bit. I know My Fair Lady has been made into a chamber version of like 10 people
I know, I
and one
didn't know
piano.
that.
Yeah,
yeah.
I've seen a production of it actually
Yeah.
in Philadelphia.
Oh,
and,
yeah.
To this day, it stands as my favorite production I've ever seen.
Wow.
I saw two wonderful Philadelphia-based actors,
cool.
and it just gets to the meat of the story. And with our production of Camelot, you really get to know these characters, and that is because the text is what drives
I think it
a
makes
piece like that.
I think it makes a difference when a show like it's another Lerner and Lowe show, interestingly
Exactly.
enough, where you have these 3 or 4 main people, and that's what's important. I don't know, well, we can get to this in a little bit, but even you would say Chicago, right, is the revival that pretty much is ubiquitous. Everybody knows when you think of Chicago, you think of this production.
Yes.
The
96, the Walter Bobby.
96, yes. Instead of the original, which was done in the 70s with Gwen Verdon, Cheetah Rivera, and Bob Fosse, originally, yeah. But then when it was reimagined right into this.
It's very. It's
kind of like the first one of these that said we can
Yes.
do this. I think the show's ahead of its time anyway. So when it came back,
100%. Basically, when they brought it to City Center in '96, because City Center likes to revive older shows and take a new spin on it, and that show, for example, they basically stripped away all these elaborate, flapper costumes and vaudeville, and the vaudeville lives in the score, it lives in the choreography, it lives in the characters, and that's what it's centered on. And again, you can bring that back to Camelot, where, this score speaks for itself, and the score is still there, and and the songs are still there, and the text is still there, so there's no need to have all this elaborate costuming and whatever if the score and the text are present and are reading. That's what makes the show. That's
Sarah,
part of the show.
and I know we can talk because you were in Oklahoma,
Yes.
in St. Louis, and you were Lori, right? And so we can get to talk about the production of Oklahoma that's on Broadway right now. That I think three of us have seen it, and or Kevin, have you seen it too? But you know what you know of the show and the differences that it makes. It's a very dark production, and I really found it fascinating, I guess might be a good word for me, the changes that were made, and that was the reason why I wanted to see the show. I'm very familiar. If you go in, you got to go in with the baggage of the show, I feel, and same way to the Fiddler on the Roof in Yiddish, which is another show that's on off Broadway right now, that I had the pleasure of seeing in that same kind of way. So with Oklahoma, do you think my father, who I went to see the show, at the show ends, he stands up and he goes, "Well, Agnes DeMille is rolling over in her grave," and and I said, "Well, the only reason I saw that show because I knew it was different. But if somebody was seeing that show for the first time, that would have been interesting."
Yeah, I'm curious to chat with someone actually who is not a typical patron of the theater to see what they interpreted and what parts of the story stuck out to them, because I thought there were specific decisions that were made to highlight things that I don't necessarily think were the specific arc or root of the story. There were a lot of things that were just an interesting take on that specific moment, but the arc of the show in its entirety, I'm curious to see what they took away from it. There were some things that I loved. There were some things that I thought were so inventive and interesting, and gosh, I just love when we combine multimedia elements in theater, and I love the idea of community and the spirit of it, where everyone on stage gets to eat food and feel like they're part of this this community, because
I don't know. The
Oklahoma
ushers were not having it. They were not.
Well, I'm sure they deal with
They
a
were
lot
like,
of ornery
move along.
workers.
Here's your cornbread. Here's your chili. Get out.
Well, they have a really hard task of hurting people.
Well, you
especially,
know what? Don't do it. You have crock pots all over the
Oh, my
stage, and
goodness.
you could
Oh,
have
my
burned something.
goodness.
I don't know.
Oh my gosh.
I can't wait for when Farmer's Alley does the scaled back version of
God.
Oklahoma, and we all just have chili in the lobby.
No way, because no, the show was
love
very.
it.
For those who haven't seen, the show is very. You can look up YouTube clips of it, I'm sure, and it's very much this ain't your grandmama's Oklahoma. You know what?
Yeah.
Way to say it.
What can we do and take Oklahoma into 2019
Yeah,
almost, and what
yeah.
does that look like? Very dark, very violent.
Yeah, I will
How
say-
the show ends, instead
Yeah.
of usually when Oklahoma ends, you're like, yeehaw, it's great. Lori and Curly are happy and it's going, everybody's riding off in the sunset. And this one, they're drenched in blood. Spoiler alert. And
I mean,
it's like this really somber cover, and they start screaming, right?
Yeah.
It's crazy.
I will say the Oklahoma itself is a very dark piece.
Yes, it is.
But that's why it's so beautiful and poignant. I think it's because it's done in a way that almost masks it, but that is life. Like, we see the world through a very filtered, beautiful lens sometimes, and I think that if you actually look at the story of Oklahoma itself, Lori's parents are dead. She's seen death. They're in in the Dust Bowl, where it's just desolate, and there are a lot of really intense themes going on that are just had this beautiful arch of it's a humdinger of Oklahoma. We're going to spell out the word over and over and over again and just make you fall in love with this production. But there were some elements I think that they highlighted that I was like, oh yeah, I kind of love that they added this in or
I do
took
like
this out.
Yeah, so there's a separation between, I guess, the scaled back nature of the show and how they change the interpretation and content.
Yeah.
Maybe. So in that perspective, would you say in terms of what was done to minimalize, what were your thoughts on that? Because this Camelot doesn't really do the other thing in terms of interpretation. We don't necessarily
with
less.
Camelot, we don't necessarily change the interpretation of the
was gonna say
piece.
that.
It's more it's just a more communal experience of the piece instead of seeing it very almost two-dimensional with these huge flats and backdrops and trees
concise and a
things.
character study
Yeah.
and yes, intimate and
They're
yeah.
more approachable. The
Right.
the characters in this Camelot, I think, are more approachable. Yes, there is a sense of royalty and hierarchy and whatnot, but because they're so close and because it's so centered on the text, you really do feel for each, especially the three.
Yeah.
And with the Oklahoma revival, I would say I think more liberties were taken, in terms of scaling back, but also with interpretation of the text. If you agree with that.
Yeah, completely.
I think and that goes across the board. I mean, these shows, Camelot, Oklahoma, My Fair Lady, Chicago, Sweeney Todd, that revival that was done where they played all their own instruments and really this whole huge show scaled back. And Into the Woods they did that off Broadway one with just a piano,
The
right?
Fiasco Theater Company.
There's these small cast versions of Big Fish. You were in Ghost, right? Were you in the small cast though?
Yeah, we did the small cast version at
So-
a theater. It's called the Rev now up in the Finger Lakes, and we had I think eight players, I believe, and it was really cool to because the piece itself was originally a film, and film is so intimate and such a small experience on this, and the dialogue itself had been lifted and kind of reworked so that it tried to work on stage. The fact that we had so few players made it feel like the film again, if that makes sense.
No, sure. I don't think these scaled back shows or versions of the show should be the gold standard
No.
necessarily, but I mean, I have no problem. I mean, I'm sure there's some people who think, why did the Rodgers and Hammerstein estate let them do this? As you said, you wish it would have been called Oklahoma inspired
revamped,
by,
or inspired by the Rodgers and Hammerstein classic Oklahoma.
So,
Yeah. But everyone has their own opinion.
absolutely, it's okay to like a show. It's okay to
And
not
the
like
fact
a
that we're
show.
still talking about the show when it it premiered in 1943, and we're still having agreements and disagreements about it. I mean, that's art. That's that keeps it
And
alive.
anything I think that gives more opportunity, personally for me, running a small 100-seat theater, I love seeing more of these titles coming out and being, in a small chamber version or minimal, because it gives us the opportunity to tell these stories that we wouldn't normally have
My
to.
only issue with the scaled back versions is that it's putting my friends out of work. That is the only thing.
That's real.
Because and as someone who really loves this music and loves the sweeping score and all that kind of stuff.
Musicians?
Yes,
right?
yes. My parents are both band directors, so. But I grew up going to see a lot of musical theater that had, a certain amount of pieces in the orchestra, and there is something so beautiful about that, and it kind of makes me sad that even in Broadway the trend now is like, let's put a bunch of instruments on the synthesizer and click track it in, and it's like almost a machine, and you're losing that live element of the artistry of collaboration and the spirit of theater, which is everyone coming together and making this show really
There
epic.
certainly is something to be said for seeing Sweeney Todd with like a huge orchestra as well. I mean,
Yes,
you can't
yes, yeah.
get out of that. So it's doubly good. Well, I want to move on here for just a little bit for a segment, I think.
Segment.
A theater etiquette segment. We'll see if this takes a life of its own.
Oh, no.
And this devolves from what happened this past weekend. So I saw 5 shows in 4 days. It was crazy because I'm a crazy man.
Epic.
And I haven't done that in like forever. So 5 shows in New York. A cell phone went off in every one. And they mean business in New York, these ushers, telling you turn off your cell phones with the announcements beforehand. I mean, Oklahoma, they said if they hear the actors hear the phone, they will stop the show and tell you to turn it off, and they will not start until you do. I mean, they do it after the intermission. There's ads, and they have it. They had like a cell phone ad in the program that was upside down. So you would literally turn it upside down to look at and said, "Please turn off your phone," and yet they still went off. I guess my question to you guys, being prolific actors, have you ever had any interesting stories about interruptions when you were in a show or watching a show, whether it was a phone or something else? And I don't know what we can do. If they can't do it on Broadway, they can't do it anywhere.
I know.
I mean, we do our best, and with obviously only 100 seats, it happens less often. But when it does, it's really noticeable because there's only 100 seats.
Nowhere for that.
Right.
Either.
Right.
They're right
So,
there.
I mean, I've definitely been in audiences where there have been audible groans by other patrons when they hear the stuff. They're like, "You just interrupted our storytelling experience." It's just really annoying. And I've certainly been on stage when cell phones have gone off.
and they don't get it.
Well, I think
They
everyone
look at the
makes
phone.
mistakes,
How many times I've looked
like,
out there and seen people looking at their phone during the show?
Yes. I certainly think that. But that's also, I think, it starts at a young age, and that's getting kids to the theater very early and teaching them proper theater etiquette. Like, you need to wait to come sit back down to your seat during the applause break, and if it's no intermission or something like that, use the restroom before. Like, there are just things that you should do as part of your experience at the theater.
And it's not meant to be snobby. It's not meant to be elitist.
Absolutely
It's just meant to we want you to have a better experience. And you're going to get that by shutting out. This is a place where you can come in and everybody sits down together and watches something together. There's something so special about that, doing that live. And I read an article recently, it's actually in the program note, if you come see Camelot at Farmers Alley Theater. There's a quote in the director's note that I wrote for the program that states that there's only 3 things in life where people do this communal gathering, and that's theater, sports, and church. Right?
Gosh.
And we all know how special those other 2 can be as well in theater, and how respectful, definitely respectful in church with that. In sports, there's so much going on. But in theater, definitely,
But everyone's quiet during a free throw. Like, you know what I mean? There's certain etiquette that is just followed that I don't think that we are teaching our kids. I also think there's also a generation gap. So some of these patrons who are coming to theater don't necessarily know how to turn off their phones. So if they're, I think
my father, yes.
I didn't think about that.
and they get, and
He
that's
doesn't
why
know
they
how.
keep ringing too, because then when they go off, you see them shuffling in their purse trying to find an A, then trying to figure out how to turn the knob off, then try to figure out, it's really like
Gets louder.
it
as
gets
they're trying to
louder,
turn it off.
exactly. So maybe
But no, has anything happened ever to you guys during a show?
See, and luckily not
You're
for
lucky.
me. Yeah, and luckily not for me. I've heard stories, and of course, there's the Patti LuPone story
Right.
in
course.
Gypsy that I guess
Ooh, tell it for our
reigned
listeners.
supreme. Just when she was singing in Gypsy, and out of nowhere, she was doing Rose's Turn, and that phone went off, and she went, "How dare you! How dare
Go on
you!"
YouTube, find the
Yeah,
recording. It's
I
fantastic.
do not do it
Was it
justice. Sorry, Patty.
Was there also a flash? Was it a flash photo too?
Oh yeah, it was
Like,
photos.
stop
Yeah,
taking
pictures. That was the one too. Yes, that was better.
It's like,
Wow, Patti LuPone sounds like Mickey.
So the moral of the story is, folks, just
I'm not an
turn off the
impressionist.
phones.
Yeah,
Just turn off the phones and just be with us for just a little bit.
exactly.
We'll monitor,
There.
and I monitor any football scores, and I tell them at intermission if they want to know. Your staff
that's
is here
great.
for you at Farmers Alley.
hey, that's great and innovative.
That's right. Sometimes they don't want to know, because they're taping it.
Fair enough.
It's the score of the game.
I'm the same way. Don't tell me.
Well, interesting. So maybe we'll talk about another theater etiquette item in the next edition, but
Ooh,
for
hot
this
tips.
time. Now, our final thing I have before we leave today, a little fun and games. I have prepared a game for the three of you, and you each have this sheet,
Oh my gosh.
What?
and the game is called Camelot or Camel Not. Okay.
She loves the game.
Yes, loves the
Now,
game.
not lot. No, look, I'm economic. I use the same other size, and I got to write it down. I got to write your names down here because I'm going to keep track. Because the winner's going to get a prize. All right, so Kevin.
Get a prize.
Oh gosh.
Oh,
no.
now
Dave.
I'm
No,
Glasses
Dave
off.
is,
This
they're
is
so
alright.
good. I am not competitive, and the two of them are
Okay.
very competitive. So
Here we
Alright.
go. This is for.
ready. I'm ready.
All right, so I'm going to name you an actor, right?
Oh gosh.
And you
Alright.
have to tell me if these actors have appeared in a Broadway or major production of Camelot, or if they've not, or tour, major production, concert,
So
etc.
lot is yes, not.
Lot
no.
is yes,
All right.
not is no.
Just want to make sure I
Then we're doing
understand
the
the
signs,
rules.
so you cannot be influenced. You will answer at the same time because you will not be influenced
Can we give
by
him a
other
prize
people's
now?
answers. So
I
okay.
know.
I'm just gonna win.
Well, we'll give you an easy one first. So the first name is Julie Andrews. Camelot or Camel Not? Lot. Very good.
Right.
Okay, you
I
are
got
all
1 point,
correct.
1 point.
Here we go. Jeremy Irons. Camelot or Camel Not? Dave says yes. Sarah and Kevin say no. Dave is correct. Jumps out to an early lead.
Sorry.
He did.
Could you fill us in on the history of that?
All right.
He did a tour.
Patrick Stewart. Did Professor Xavier play it? All of you say no. Camel Not. You are correct. So,
My blood pressure's getting up there.
Yeah.
actually, skip this one because it's easy. Robert Goulet, folks. Robert Goulet, yes, the original Lancelot. He also played King Arthur as well.
Did
right?
1992 the tour.
Here we go. Here's another king.
Year of my
Sean
birth.
Bean. Was Sean Bean ever in Camelot? Camelot or Camel Not? Not. Everybody says not. You are correct.
All right. I got nervous.
All right. Dave's still up 1. Gabriel Byrne. Irish actor. Gabriel Byrne. Kevin and Dave say lot. You say not. He was in a production
Lincoln
of
Center.
Camelot. Yes. that is-
Marin Maisie.
Oh.
2008.
Well, okay, my next person is Marin Maisie, so you just
Oh no!
lost.
You gave it
See?
away.
You just
I'm
lost
giving
a
history.
point.
I just wanted to keep it fair.
It's
okay.
theater history.
All right. Patti LuPone. We were speaking of Patti LuPone. Has Patti LuPone ever done Camelot before? I'll say no. You're correct. She has never done Camelot.
be a great
What about
Morgan
Christine Ebersol? Christine Ebersol. Yes, her partner from War Paint and famous Tony-winning actress Christine Ebersol was Guinevere in that revival.
1980.
Yes.
I didn't know that.
Richard Burton.
Okay. Let's see. Stephen Pasquale, famous Broadway actor and film actor. Stephen Pasquale. Has he ever done Camelot? Dave says yes. Sarah and Kevin say no. Kevin ties it up.
No.
Folks.
No. Oh, I thought he was a knight.
Feels like we're playing
Never
Super
did.
Smash Brothers again right now.
All right.
I'm nervous.
Christopher Lloyd, Camelot or Camel Not? I'll say yes. You are correct. Doc Brown. I don't know what part he was. I didn't see.
Pelennor.
Pelennor. Okay.
There is no other role.
Yeah. And he was great.
All right. Matthew Broderick, Camelot or Camel Not? Not. You say yes. No, he was not in it.
Okay.
What about Sarah Jessica Parker? Camelot or Camel Not? You say lot. They were not. Oh, Dave runs ahead.
Oh, did I? Oops.
Oh, it's a technicality. It's all right. I'm
No,
still
it's
Oh,
not.
did you mean
I
to say
lose.
that?
I meant to say nothing.
Okay.
I lost the point.
It's all right. You got to be careful.
All right. This is close. Okay. This is the last one, you guys.
Oh, my God.
Dave is ahead by 1. We'll have a tiebreaker maybe if you get this. Jeremy Koch.
Oh.
Sarah is correct.
No!
Never in Camelot.
No!
You win. Dave still wins.
But,
Yes!
but hey, tie for second place. Are we tied?
And Sarah and Kevin were tied.
Now Jeremy has to do Camelot.
Yes,
Miss.
he
So
Yes, he does.
you get a drink on us, Dave.
Oh,
Can
great.
we
That's
just
it.
put Jeremy's face in the moon as Merlin?
And then we can
I
get
see
our
his
points
face
back.
in the moon.
So technically, I got the last question correct because Jeremy, you are in the
Jeremy
moon.
kind of is a villain.
I just went. I see his face in the moon. Slow fade into Jeremy's face.
Oh my gosh, congratulations.
But then we
Well,
have to get a
I am
super
very
smile
impressed.
back.
You have your Camelot acting knowledge. Folks, if you want to see these 3 fine actors, be on that level of Richard Burton and Julie Andrews and Robert Goulet and hear some fabulous music and have a great time and in seeing this inspiring, new work along with the rest of a really cool audience. Come down to Farmers Alley October 4th to the 27th. And you go to our website at farmersalleytheater.com and get all the info. Guys, thank you so much for
Thank you,
being with
Adam.
us today.
So much fun.
We're so glad to have you in Kalamazoo. And folks, when you come down, comment on this, share the podcast. Tell us if there's any shows, classic shows that you might want to see back. What would a 5-person Music Man? I think we could do that. Make that, just do Annie with like 8 people and one girl can be all the orphans, something like that.
Oh
I
my
think
God.
that opens up a lot of possibilities.
Yes, it does.
We are going to write this 5-person Music Man. I'm excited.
Sarah, Dave, Kevin, thank you. Thank you for Public Media Network for all of their help. Matt, thank you for working the booth, I guess, here in the corner. And we'll see you next time for Inside the
having
Alley.
us.
Thank you. See you at the
Thank you,
theater.
Adam. See you.